Welcome to the cryptozoology show. This is part 5 of river Lochness monster there and lake and river monsters. And this time we're going to be doing the Asian lake and river monsters. And everything from giant eels to dragons sort of creatures, right? So you got and we'll cover some huge sorts of fish available there and sorts of things like that. Oh, there was a few things that got cut off on the other show, so we might as well get this over with just in case if you didn't read down in the sort of comments section there. There was a part that was cut off about in England they had came up with this thing called the method, which is identical to what was already being done from the late 60s as a little boy, but really heavily through the 70s, especially and 80s, and stuff like that, and as it went along, and what we call frisbee fishing. And how this occurred is when I would bring out kids and stuff like that, some of them would get bored, and I had so many different bags of these sorts of flavorings of baits every day and things like that, that some of them would start playing with it like Play-Doh. And actually this kid was sort of helped me sort of get this invention idea sort of going, right, this frisbee technique, because he was bored and he chucked this out into the sort of our Rideau Canal system, and the sort of it started sinking down this sort of frisbee shape like this, and he said, "Hey, let's play frisbee," and he shot it past me and it went into this sort of drink. And as it was sinking down, it was on this sort of gravel little area that was very shallow there in this one sort of section, so you could actually see the bottom still fairly well, even in those days when they didn't have any weeds and the water was more murky. And all of a sudden, this whole gang of sort of carp all started going around it, and they started chumping and chowing down on it and ripping chunks off of it. So I said, "Hey, bingo, man, this is interesting like this." So I started doing that instead of just the regular chumming sort of way of throwing out in different little blobs of them and stuff like that. And what I would do is just chuck it out, and if I needed to shoot it a bit farther, I'd make it like a pizza dough and just chuck it out to the spot that I wanted and shoot it across into the water, right? And then when it would sink down, I'd try and cast exactly to sink it right over the top area of it, or if it was right below me, if the fish were closer to the bank and stuff, I would just drop it down and I could watch them, and I'd put a different colored sort of bait on it or anything that I could see the difference, and then I'd notice a little twitch, and they'd pick it up and they'd go nuts all over this. And another thing, when early walleye anglers and stuff like that, they used to have like floating jig heads and all kinds of different things like that. So way before these pop-up things, what I would do is that I started using little hooks and pieces of styrofoam, and I would float corn up off the bottom, or different sorts of peas, or all kinds of weird things that I tried, craft dinner, you name it, 5 zillion sorts of weird things that I would try. And I would get this to just get enough of this stuff on there, and then I started messing around. Somebody came up with this early walleye of shooting, injecting air inside of the crawlers. So then I started messing with that, and I would experiment them on walleyes and stuff like that. But I started catching huge bass and all kinds of other sort of fish doing this as well. And it was exactly as what I was already doing with these pieces of styrofoam, but it looked even better because you didn't have the little pieces of styrofoam on it. Less garbage in their mouth, less likely they'll spit it, right? And sort of thing like that. So this worked even better, and you could blow up a piece of worm, and then I'd thread on like all kinds of any kind of particle baits or different things, or soak the worms in flavors and these sorts of stuff. And in the canal especially, so a lot of times in the day the fish would rise like a foot or two, and you'd see great big groups of them going back and forth. So in the slow times, instead of waiting for them for 10 minutes to go down and start feeding again, you would just sort of pop this up and sort of lift it off the bottom. And and all the time when I first started experimenting with these heavily and stuff like that, you would also this worked very well on suckers and even even sturgeon would nail this by floating it up off the bottom a little bit and stuff like that, and would fly in the current back and forth, right? So even though these English make these claims, these things, that I actually won a fishing contest for carp here in the region before the hair rig was even sort of first acknowledged or invented, or these things. And we use the exact same kind of similar sort of stuff. A lot of times, to make the bait bigger, what I would do is I would just tie another piece of smaller line onto my main hook, and then just put a tiny little English smaller minnow size hook on it, and I would thread up corn this way, and then make it like really long and cover the whole entire thing, right? And this is exact same principle. I'd use like 2-pound line, the exact same thing, so it's identical really, and pop these up off the bottom with a piece of, like I said, crawler. I just hook this at the end, I put the cord on, and then have the tiny little hook, get the piece of crawler, and either put some sponges on, pieces of styrofoam, or then when I started doing this early sort of worm blowing stuff, then I started doing it that way. And it worked fantastic, and sort of it's just so, even though there's a lot of things that they sort of, you know what I mean, really, these things were already done in other places, right? So, so it's one of those things, right? But I mean, in history, these guys get the credit for stuff that isn't reality, right? Like sort of at all. So it was done way before. So, but anyways, that's just what we're talking about there. And another thing that gotten cut off was about the sort of. There was another lake that was supposed to be, a few frames got cut out. I don't know exactly what sort of happened there, but anyways, here we'll get them back in. So the other one was Lake Gretchen, Sweden. And so we'll just cover that one here for a second. Gretchen Lake, Sweden reports go back to late 1700s and vary in description from seal-like to serpent. One-tailed tern, 1800s, a woman standing on the shore saw a large, fat, rounded beast that was blowing air and spraying out of its mouth. Water and stuff spraying out of his mouth. It got cut off there, I guess, somehow. Most sightings were not well recorded and hard to ascertain what is or was being seen. Sightings still continue, including a bunch in the 1980s, and in 1992, a sonar reading indicating a creature of over 14 feet long, and it was tested and stuff, and it was not a school of fish, right? So it was one solid object. One of the theories is it could be a relic sea cow that's actually in there. So the descriptions are weird or whatever, right? But that was that. And the other one we wanted to mention here was about sort of, because this reminded me very much of the Rideau Canal, sort of this Liffey River here. It has brown trout and salmon so much cleaner than our Rideau Canal system sort of thing, but it's still getting more heavier used. And was the more and more that it does, then the more mutant the stuff is going to become, and eventually it's going to start going downhill, like a lot of these rivers are worldwide, right? And we need to stop doing these sorts of stuff here. Like this beautiful river Liffey travels like 82 miles to the sea, and has reports of giant fish in it, huge sturgeon, huge eels, and sort of things like that, right? So just another sort of monster water that's quite interesting. This river in some areas is similar, like I said here, to our Rideau Canal, and has some tales of giant eels and all that sort of stuff in it. So, but other more heavily used waters like the Thames and the sort of ones like that, they're full of garbage and stuff like that, and they start getting these mutant fish here, like this poor 55.5-inch mutant muskie out of our canal system, right? Now, these guys don't get as fat as, like I showed you in the previous Ottawa River monsters. They get, so what happens though is there's a lot of fish from the Ottawa River get in here, and I suspect this one actually was one of them, but usually the Rideau fish are even thinner, sort of things like this, the ones that actually were born in this system and things like that. But it was still decent sort of girth to it, not too shabby sort of thing. But the thing is that what happens is once they get in here, then they don't hunt as well, and the prey is different and everything like that, and they got to exert a lot more energy. It's also a lot of stress, lots of boats going over their heads every second, and all kinds of things like that. So these kinds of things can be none conducive for great feeding, and you'll see these giant monster Ottawa river fish that occasionally get in, and a lot of times on this rare circumstances they start getting skinnier by the minute, right? Because the longer they're in there, and some of them will last fine and they'll still continue on for years to come. But the thing is that they do lose some of the weight and stuff. The Ottawa river fish, they have way more room, a lot more sort of species to sort of hunt, and easier for them and all that sort of thing, so they get way fatter, right? But just gives you an idea here. Like, I mean, 5 billion people, that's what I was explaining. This slide was supposed to be in the other one, is that there's people who go by there that I've had arguments with that claim there isn't even sunfish in there, and when I tell them there's giant walleyes or all kinds of other species, they just cannot believe or fathom these things, right? But here in the most filthiest garbage sort of water, the amount of pollutants, the what sadly is our politicians and stuff like that got cheap on the budget. And in the 1960s, they had garbage cans, 2 garbage cans per bench, with way less people. There was only a few 100,000 in the city of Ottawa, and way less tourists and things like that. Yet fully every day they were cleaned and completely loaded out. But instead now, even restaurants have been seen doing this. They sneak out at night, and so they don't have to pay the fines for this sort of garbage disposal, because once you get a certain amount, then the city wants to charge them more and stuff like that. So what they do is now they go over and sneak out along the canal and chuck it in. So I'll be showing all through these Ottawa River System Canal and different bodies of water around here what's occurring with these kinds of things, and how these guys have removed now the garbage cans off of most benches, and even when there is some on some of them, there's only one. So the garbage is now being chucked in there and killing these monsters. Most lakes do not produce even Eagle Lake usually doesn't produce too many of this sort of length, right? So that sort of stuff, and these are world famous muskie fisheries and things like that, and yet these sorts of, here in our own backyard, some monsters exist, right? And yet these people throw in everyday piles of garbage and garbage and garbage, like unbelievable amounts of stuff into our system every weekend. They rent out tons of kayaks and paddle boats and all kinds of stuff, and these guys just eat anything, and they chuck all their bottled water in there. They chuck umbrellas in there. They chuck their garbage suitcases. You name it, it's just disgusting. These poor creatures are going way down in numbers, a lot of them, sort of things like that. And I mean, we're killing these things, and we're doing this worldwide in all kinds of bodies of water. So yeah, there's still some monsters, but I mean, why make it difficult on them? It's bad enough when in the 60s and stuff like that, before they didn't sort of, the water level was treated different and sort of stuff like that, but they decided to make it tried to make it the world's longest skating rink, and it isn't anymore. Apparently one in Sweden or some other place, Poland or wherever it was, I can't remember, but some other place apparently even beats it now for length. But the thing is that every year what they do is these poor fish, I mean, the water depth is average of only about 5 feet, and these guys drain it down to almost nothing. There's like less than about a foot of water, and every spring you'll find dead sorts of ones that laying up on some bank somewhere, some old giant muskie or a big old carp that's like 40 pounds on it, or all these kinds of stuff, right? Or a giant walleyes occasionally, or a huge smallmouth or largemouth, or different ones. And these poor things, because they got stuck in certain areas and they couldn't get through. When I was a kid, we used to ice fish for them and go along along and sort of jig through the holes, and these poor guys be stuck in less than 6 inches or a foot of water. And it's amazing how shallow that they could get. And sometimes you'd get a real monster through the ice, and yet it was only like a foot of water and things like that. But this is what they do, right? And there's no real reason to lower it that much. And actuality, because like even when they try and lower it fully, there's still holes in Dow's Lake in certain areas where you're skating that are way deeper, sort of, and still even when they drain it, there's still some bit of depth there and that sort of thing. But you're forcing all these poor fish to be lodged all close to each other in sort of these holes. And yeah, it's a rough go for them, right? So me personally, I don't know why they do this, and you certainly shouldn't be throwing garbage in there. They need to sort of let the water stay up a little bit above this of what they're doing, because it's ridiculous. If you fell through, almost any human being is usually, unless you're a very small child or stuff like that, but they shouldn't be letting you go out in the ice if it's not safe anyways. So there shouldn't be concern about this. And basically to save the fish and the wildlife here a little bit and sort of that sort of thing, they need to increase the sort of not shock them as much, because they drain it like down to nothing, just little puddles, and these poor fish then rush for their lives and sort of all congregated. Now it's a fun, easy catching for a muskie or some of the bigger ones that'll survive through it. But I mean, other ones aren't, right? Because sort of they get stuck in these little pockets and things. So just things to think about. I mean, we need to really sort of stop doing these sorts of things here, or where we're not going to have sort of much left here. And this is happening worldwide with this in China and all over every country you can pretty well think of, from Russia to every place. People are polluting and polluting. Bottled waters, 10 million of them. And what gets me the most is, like, every time on weekends here we have all kinds of events and stuff like that when it's corona approved, right, with this new corona stuff. But previous in the past, that's what we've always done, and we'll be doing it again, I'd imagine, eventually, sort of stuff. But the thing is that when these people have these sort of events, I watched one time, and I got it on film here, like literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wrappers of granola, because they were all handing the bikers giving around granola, yet they were trying to save some sort of river or whatever it was. I can't even remember what it was. It was some crazy charity of some sort. And here, what you're trying to do, but yet you're the ones who are causing all the garbage in the system. Right? So, like, I mean, these things are ridiculous. So, like, when you're organizing these things, stop with this plastic bottled water stuff, or demand that people put it in and not into our water systems, right? And the other problem is that we're introducing all kinds of foreign species. That's why the canal's very wrecked. Like in the old days, it was the greatest, most fastest carp fishery in the entire world, probably. It's like, I mean, over 100 fish quite often and things like that. I mean, that's pretty well unheard of across any sort of place you can find. And these sort of things, and I mean, it was a much sort of like a different fishery, and a way more smallmouth bass in it, much less largemouth. Now almost all largemouth, much less smallmouth. Because of these zebra mussels, they created massive growth of weeds, and of course largemouth and certain species like these a little bit better. Right? But they wiped out, because now the water's crystal clear. The carp fry and all the minnow species that used to be in there by tons, giant golden shiners and all kinds of stuff, most of them went downhill to zero, or just barely a few floating around, sort of thing, because they're all eaten up at the water's crystal clear. They see every little school of fry, and they attack them, right? So in the old days, they didn't have this. The water was quite murky. They couldn't catch them all and see them that well, and largemouth didn't spawn with that well, only a few in some back bays, marshy bays. There was always some, the odd ones. but in general there wasn't that many. It was way more of a smallmouth sort of fishery and sort of things like that. So just by adding these zebra mussels, a lot of species that used to exist are near zero, or completely eliminated, or that the only good thing is that any of the ones that was in there can be refed from the Ottawa River, and occasionally this happens where you won't see something for a few years and all of a sudden you'll see a few of them, because when they open up the locking systems, sometimes fish that of different species that are still okay in the river system where they're not fully extinct yet, sort of idea, they traverse and come up into it, right? So they'll get visitors like some of the waters we're going to cover here, sort of thing, right? But anyways, it's just keep these things in mind, because we really are destroying our fisheries worldwide, and then these monsters aren't going to exist much longer if we continue doing these sorts of stuff. Now, all through Asia, there is a host of unknown and known monsters, of snakes to dragon, along with monster fish. Lake monsters of many sorts exist. Here, this bizarre cryptid turtle to unknown mammalian-like creature was filmed in Thailand, body of water unknown. Look at this strange thing. It almost looks like a sort of a doll or something, right? But I mean, at first I was thinking that, but then when I watched the film many times, his eyeballs actually changed, sort of thing here. So that's not likely. And then also, it's pretty strange here for a doll. Look at this weird sort of wing-like sort of stuff that it has on it. So and it looked like it was flapping its sort of wings, like almost like it's so extremely weird looking sort of creature. But what's interesting about it is it has like odd sort of. It looks anything from sort of like some kind of weird rodent sort of face to sort of that sort of thing, but also turtleish like in some strange ways, and others sort of. So it's a very sort of weird creature that's seemingly very nondescript here. I mean, I don't know of anything like it ever that I've ever heard of, and so I find it interesting. It's too bad that the guy he posted it, but he wouldn't say what the body of water was, right? But I mean, it looks very strange, and I mean, it's hard to know. But I mean, I certainly it certainly looks interesting. Anyways, sort of thing. Now, on another show there, I'd already covered this sort of a thing like that. But there's, like I said, a lot of people post these sort of things, and then they put a little bits of wrong information. So what this was, this one was filmed on the Yangtze River here. Dragon, aka giant eels, this sort of amazing beast was filmed at the Three Gorges Dam on the Yangtze, and it was estimated to be at least 18 to 20 foot long, possibly longer. The creature swims up against fast current, and in all likelihood is an actual giant Angola. Now, even though some people claim it's a snake, that's ridiculous. You can actually see a spine-like sort of ridge sticking out. So snakes don't have that. Also, he would be way more rounded than this. This is very Angolish-like, actually, much more so than sort of thing. And these giant eel stories is so many around the planet that I mean it's mind-boggling. So, and this one here, the same thing. They have these giant sort of eel tails, right, from time to time, or dragon-like sort of thing. But whatever it was, it's definitely too large to be any sort of known freshwater sort of Angola or any of the other sorts of ones, and it's certainly not what they're claiming. People trying to claim it's garbage. Garbage can't swim up against fast current. You can fully see this thing's alive, and when you watch the film, I mean, it's very sort of credible, perfectly alive creature. You can actually see two guys on the left, so you can get an idea of how big it is compared to even them at one point of it, and that sort of thing like that. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of people that say silly things that, I mean, anybody that believes this is a piece of garbage, you need some glasses. This is fully a live creature, no ifs or buts about it, and it's not a snake. Snakes don't have a sort of spine-like ridge like that. The tail is extremely eel-like. It would have been all more perfectly rounded. This is much more sort of flat-like, and that sort of thing. Like it's definitely not a snake, and it's definitely some kind of Angolish-like sort of creature. I mean, I can't tell you what species. I mean, it's impossible to know that, but because none of them are known to get this sort of big, but nevertheless, it is some kind of Angola-like sort of creature here, and just another more evidence proving these giant eel-like sort of things exist, right? So, but extremely interesting. I hear a lake monster warrior, that the Lake Tianchi monster, located between North Korea and China, also known as Heaven Lake. It was created in 900 AD after an eruption. Uh, there's this bull-like creature. One early account in 1903, people were attacked by the monster. They shot at it 6 times before it vanished into the depths. Some years, like in 1962, over 100 witnesses, and often a creature chasing one another. People would spot that, and groups of up to 50 of them at a time. Some people would claim. Now here you can actually see the rounded circle there. This guy, some worker from some kind of zoo-like thing around there, had actually sort of filmed this, and you can see that great big sort of long underwater black creature of some sort. So very interesting sort of lake, but absolutely beautiful, right? And no wonder they call it Heaven Lake. I mean, that looks pretty heavenly. I can't believe that. I can't blame them there whatsoever. I mean, that's just absolutely amazing sort of thing. But here we'll check out the next one here. And this one here, Canis Lake, here tourists shot an 8-minute video that for sure is not a school of fish or a boat wake or a moose. The lake is said to be near 600 feet deep, and attacks on people's livestock drinking by the lake, from camels to horses, makes these beasts scary creeps. Right? It covers over 46 kilometers. Chinese soldiers in 2003 said that they witnessed a creature with a black head and horns. Besides all that, huge shotamen are thought to exist in the lake, or similar is said to grow 10 feet long, sort of idea. So just another sort of interesting one here. Look at, you can see just like in that sort of one from Yugoslavia, a similar like sort of disturbance it's making, and you can see the great big sort of white there going along the shore. And here's a group of them where you can see these black sort of things sticking all through, and here's a bunch of them scooting along the lake, right? Look at the disturbance they're making. So that's pretty huge. And so I don't know exactly what's these things are, but I mean, you know, there's different sort of tales, right? But I mean, extremely sort of interesting, fascinating sort of whatever that they may possibly be, right? But very interesting. I sort of one, and it has a good long sort of history sort of to it. So it's and there's some decent sort of films out of it already, and different photographs and weird stuff. So it certainly has some validity to it of some sort. Whatever it is, it's hard to know, right? But because there's varied reports, but still, it sounds pretty huge if he's eating sort of camels and horses by the water. That sounds a bit out there. So that's pretty scary. I wouldn't want to camp along its shores, you know. So I love I love this one here. This Lake Mashu, China, a giant crayfish monster. It's so, you can see the giant tracks here. These guys were down in, these researchers, and they were just looking around and stuff, and then they found these giant tracks on there. And since the 1970s, they started collecting these sort of stories of these giant sort of monster-sized crayfish, right, of epic proportions. I've never been able to get exactly how big that these things get, but they're making them sound like they're pretty huge, right? Something like a lobster-like size sort of idea to them, sort of idea. So that's a very interesting sort of thing. I would love to chase this one because I believe it would be easy to sort of prove the tale, right? I mean, I've been trapping crayfish since I was a child, using them for bait for everything from sturgeon to giant smallmouth bass and stuff, right? So I certainly know how to do that with the old-fashioned sort of ways, baiting sort of minnow traps and these sorts of stuff, or a much simpler way, just start lifting up rocks and start grabbing, right? Sort of thing like that. But I mean, I like the scripted, so I'm always interested in the strange ones, and this one I think would be a very probable one that you could prove. Sort of like it wouldn't take long at all, probably. I bet you in a night you could do this. Right? Because, I mean, you could see there, like, I mean, if you got the baited traps out in the stench, these crayfish can smell this stuff for ages, and they'll find it eventually, right? So if there's any goon, big monster crayfish floating around, he's gonna be homing in on some juicy chunk of fish sitting on the bottom there in some kind of trap. Make miniature like lobster traps, sort of idea, similar thing, and away we go here. And let's I can prove this Lake Mushu monster, right? Sort of thing here. Now here, this is a very good one for people that are interested. If you're bass fishermen, Lake Biwa, giant monster bass. There's been some stories of apparently some like over 15 kilos, but none can be proved of this, right? But there's certainly some like 15 pounds plus out of this sort of a body of water, sort of thing like that, and sort of for sure bare minimum, and there's much more sort of likely early 20s sort of fish and stuff like that probably available. But here's some mooses here and stuff like that. But everybody, when people see these things and they say, "Oh my God, look at the size of that bass," these, like, if you see these northerns here, like these were brought into a Quebec tournament, and this is only half of the stringer of a 6-fish limit that weighed over 37 pounds. 37 pounds, 2 ounces for 6 fish. Now, in Canadian waters, no team tournament in history has ever done such a thing, and no singular human being ever, except on this occasion. And this was brought into a sort of a Quebec sort of a tournament, and obviously was won with it. But the thing is that this is more than even team tournaments have ever achieved, right? And I mean, this is unheard of in Canadian waters. Almost never, like, you'll have like 150 bass boats out and a team, let's say, right, and sort of thing like that, somewhere in this range, under 150 of them, sometimes more, whatever, depends on the team tournament rules or whatever that they had. But in these kinds of ranges, and only one fish, if the lake has even the ability to produce it that big, will come out like that, or maybe 2 you might see, or something like that. But you never hear of anybody in Canadian waters sort of do it. But the Ottawa River at this time was a virgin sort of fishery. The people still, even the netters of from the Ministry of Natural Resources, still weren't even listing largemouth. They thought they didn't exist in the river. They still hadn't even caught them in their nets yet. But they were starting to have these early bass tournaments. And I guided on there for sort of ages, right, and all that sort of stuff. And every day I would reel in these monsters all the time, right? So I tortured fish, big giant ones that I knew were in different locations, and I brought in I caught these by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had these strange rules where this commander guy had to be there to sign off the official weight thing, and this guy kept hours and hours of these fish sitting here. So even though they had it on the paper until he could sign for it and stuff like that, you couldn't do anything. And I actually had to eventually release them because they were starting to get weak. Right? Sort of stuff like this. But it was the most astonishing sort of achievement ever, sort of probably ever brought in a Canadian bass tournament in history, right? Sort of thing like that. So these monsters here, right, like, they're sort of like, that's the thing, is like a 7-pound bass here is equivalent like to a 12-14 pound bass in Florida, sort of thing, right? And that sort of idea. So it's all how you sort of, whatever is available possibly that they can get, right, you section it off in that sort of way. So you know, like if you're way far north and you sort of get a nice big bass, I don't know, he's like 5.5 pounds, 6 pounds. He's a real monster. That's a big, big fish for that sort of like particular area, right? And he's equal to a 10 pound bass in Florida sort of idea. And that's the thing is so even though these fish get artificially fed easily by other sorts of huge fish that are in there, they have much longer growing season and all kinds of stuff, and it's a great big deep sort of huge sort of lake and sort of thing. So all these combined create these monsters, right? But that's the thing is, and the reason monsters existed in the Ottawa River is for decades, the massive eons, they logged in there. So when I started fishing it in the 60s and stuff like that, in the 70s and 80s, they started clearing it up. It was loaded full of logs, so nobody would tear the only the most insane sort of people was out on the river, because there was 10,000 underwater sort of sunken logs constantly every 2 feet, and you couldn't see them because the water was pure murky. There was no zebra mussels in it yet, or these kinds of things. And what would happen is that these fish never saw humans ever, right? So you got a person with huge skill of sort of, in fishing, of all kinds of, using any kind of equipment and all kinds of stuff and knowing how to find big fish, and right? Now you got this in fishing waters where there's monsters exist, and it's virgin sort of waters. Now you can achieve such a thing, right? Today, these same places that I caught these sort of fish now have campers on them and all kinds of stuff, and these things are pretty well barren now. There's not remotely as many as what there was, right? There's still some monsters in that. I'm thinking some over 8 in there, and there has been a few over 9 pounds, including 2 that over the ages I lost, that I believe was in that sort of range compared to ones I'd caught. And I caught one in Black Lake in New York, a 9.5 pound one, and another one near 10 pounds in Florida, right? And one that I brought right to the boat, a 14, the guide that was with me. That was the only time I actually ever been out with a guide, really. But it was, I needed to get out there in a boat, sort of, and I wanted to get some monster bass and stuff like that. And I never got to fish. Almost all the waters I got to fish only had bass like less than 10 pounds, and I've been able to achieve that sort of stuff. I've gotten them as big as I could humanly get in our sorts of systems, right? But in Florida market, I only got to fish it a few times, sort of thing. And so I hooked this huge one, just a little over 14 pounds in Lake Kissimmee, right? But that's only monster sort of to date, right? That's the closest sort of a real titan, right? So I'd still love to go to sort of Cuba or California again, or something like that, so I could fish like one of these deep reservoirs where they got like an 18, 20 pound fish available. And I love fishing these gin clear tough sort of lakes and on ultralight line and all that kind of stuff, and I'd have no problem reeling in one of these monsters, is like I do with giant carp or muskies or any other fish. I land with real light line. Right? So no difference, right? But I mean, I in fact I won tournaments coming in behind people, knowing that they were, because a lot of them would follow me around and stuff like that, and they'd see some of the areas you fish. So when a tournament would be on, they'd go in there, and if they got to you faster, some of them had faster bass boats in some of the contests and stuff like that, so they got there first. And I would go in there and fish behind them, and use like 2, 4, 6 pound line. And one tournament I had to cast behind them. It was crystal clear, no wind, nobody was getting hits and stuff like that. But I ended up getting this one well over 6 pounds something on it, and ended up being the big bass of the tournament, sort of. And I landed that with 2 pound line around heavy cover. Right? I got a picture of it. I'll show you another time, stuff like that. But the thing is that these are the things, is that by overfishing, introducing sort of foreign species and all kinds of stuff, you really can destroy some of the, and nobody'd believe, like in these days of times, to see striggers like that. I mean, it's unheard of, right? But I mean, the thing is if you got virgin waters, the people are really skilled and they got the right sort of baits and equipment, yes, you can achieve such sort of gigantic things, right? But I'd love to fish this Lake Biwa here. Definitely the monster place to go, right? Sort of stuff like that. But also there's rumors of giant eels up to like 10 feet long in it, so definitely a great place for sure. Here, Lake Ikeda, Japan. This extinct volcano first known reports of the bee surface news in the 70s. There's a few films of strange things like that. Nickname Issy, the species described serpent to Lochness type, about 15 to 20 feet long typically. The lake is also known to have very large eels. Although they discount this theory that it could be a large eel, it is plausible to show you in other lakes it's plausible. And as you can see, some species can get pretty huge. Look at the size of these goons here. they, they, I don't know if I'd want to swim in there. They'd be fun to scrap with, man, because look at the girth on them, eh? They're pretty hefty there. So, but I mean, look at them. Like, could you imagine you're swimming in the water and all of a sudden about 40 of these goons start wrapping around you, doo-doo? Right? So, absolutely fascinating. Pretty scary sort of spot to go swimming there for sure. But beautiful lake. But sightings have went downhill. There is some films, I've seen a few where it's pretty weird. Like it's likely there is something to it. So, but I can't. I was trying to find frames of one of them, and now I can't find this movie. I know I got a bookmark someplace on the planet, but I haven't been able to find it. But so if I do, I'll put it in another one or something like that. Here in the Jinky River in Thailand, look at the friggin' sight. Look at all these people in the background, and this is one of the parts where this thing comes up. And I call him the toucan Sam monster because look at his strange. He's got this sort of weird, sort of eye-like thing. But you know, there's fish that are similar like this with the same sort of spots in the back and this sort of thing like this. Extremely peculiar sort of a thing here, where it's interesting. The all these people are looking at this thing, and you see it come up. And some of the estimates were apparently that this thing was like 80 foot sort of long to it, and sort of so pretty huge, man. Right? So interesting film. I have no idea exactly what it is. It's too hard to ascertain because you can't see close enough to get sort of but it's definitely more sort of snake-like-ish, sort of strange sort of one, right? But I call him the toucan Sam one because it reminds me of the beak and this sort of eyeball-like looking thing of what toucan Sam, right? Sort of thing like that. But I mean, it's just another sort of interesting sort of a cryptid there for sure. That's pretty creepy. I certainly wouldn't go swimming in that river. So here, this one here, Baofeng Lake, giant man-eating toads. Now I love this one most of all. This is one wild, scary cryptid found in China. One account claimed by a Chinese scientific expedition of 3 giant pale white toad monsters that had 6 feet wide mouths and that screeched and hissed at them and tried to eat their camera. Sightings seem to have stopped, and not much further info of it. But there was these sightings for some time, and I think the last one's in the sort of. I can't even. But it's been some time since the last sort of sighting of this sort of one. But very interesting, and I mean there might be a few of them still left. It's sad if they're extinct. But could you imagine what on earth? Like, could you imagine that's even bigger than the giant Aputani frog that I told you about, the king of frogs, right? But these are apparently some kind of toad-like sort of creatures. Could you imagine a 6-foot wide mouth? And apparently these things have been blamed on eating people. Seriously, I mean, that is absolutely sort of terrifying. I mean, I don't know about that one, but I would love to sort of like, this is another cryptid that you possibly could catch, because I mean, if you sort of put out some kind of wacky sort of bait, I've hooked all kinds of bullfrogs by casting out sort of in front of them, boom, 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 like this when I was a kid. Used to do that all the time because back in those days you could catch frogs and there was 5 million of them around and stuff like that. Now bodies of water that I used to fill up garbage bags full of frogs you could catch when you were a kid, right? And now you could walk miles and never see a frog. Right? So, I mean, are very, very sort of different. So, it could be that these climatic changes are happening worldwide, and pollution and over sort of harvests and things and all kinds of stuff may be causing that. But mind you, that looks still in pretty pristine condition there. So, anyways, definitely it'd be a cryptid I'd like to chase. I wouldn't want to be swimming in lake by any means, not with some 6 foot toad that might be that apparently eats the odd individual. That's not good, but I bet you could get this thing on film and trap it possibly and something like that, sort of thing like that. And it would be that would be the most astonishing thing if it actually is real. That would be incredible thing, a giant killer monster toad, right? I like it anyways. I like the idea of it. So but very fascinating. I mean, you got to admit, and what a beautiful place, eh? I mean, just absolutely stunning. Here, another one, Wenbu Lake in China, a scary ox-like beast with horns and large. This big lake covers over 320 square miles, and reports of the creature say it's black with scales and long neck. Like, here's some of them here. Chen Ting, a researcher, geology and ancient life, wrote in the Peking Evening News recently that residents and officials living near the lake had cited these mysterious sightings and had mysterious disappearances. Chen said one official told them that him and 2 others had seen a dinosaur-like creature with a body as big as a house, a long neck and a small head, swimming through the water. Others gave similar descriptions of the creature and reports that a man piloting a raft across the lake had been swallowed up without a trace in a whirlpool that appeared suddenly in the center of the lake. He said that the official told him he once left a cow tied to the trees beside the lake and returned later to find it missing. The beach was marked with tracks indicating that the cow had been dragged into the water, he said. Wambu Lake is approximately 40 feet deep and has a hot spring bubbling up from the bottom, a suitable habitat to support a monster. Chen wrote it was part of an ocean 300 million years ago, and since then has been geologically isolated. The lake is so isolated that Chen, while on a geological survey trip, had to walk 6 days from Shenxi County, 450 miles from the city of Lhasa in southeastern Tibet. Chen said the mysterious creature appears to be very similar to one in Ness. Researchers have sought for years to establish positive proof of the Scottish monster's existence. The survival of the dinosaur and other ancient life forms in Wenbu Lake is possible, Chen said, adding that hard work by scientists may eventually bring the truth to the surface. So, interesting sort of account there. Here, I like this one too. Lake Qinghai. Qinghai. Look at how beautiful that is, right? That this living dragon-like beast with iridescent scales and a snake head. Olama said he had seen it and it had a snake-like head with glistening scales. Several sightings occurred in the later 40s and has depths of over 100 feet. There's a species of carp that few have ever heard of and that is endemic only to the lake called the naked carp and was discovered by Przewalski, discoverer of the ancient horse. And he also describes almas in his sort of thing, Yetis, right? Sort of thing. So this Przewalski guy discovered a lot of sort of stuff. Sadly, the naked carp and lake monsters are getting a much less supply due to lake salinity and declining water quality. So they've gone way down sort of hill, but fascinating sort of a species. I wasn't able to get a clear photo of one of them, but it's sort of a remote sort of area here. But fascinating sort of just another sort of unusual carp species. I'd sure love to catch it. I want to. That would be my ultimate dream, to catch every sort of carp species on Earth, right? And I'll show you some monster ones coming up there. But I mean, this naked carp, that's a specific only spot that you can sort of get this thing, right? So. And maybe a few little systems that are around it, but that's about it, right? So fascinating sort of a lake, and it's too bad it's getting full of salinity here and more pollution and all that kind of stuff, and the poor lake monster might be no more, right? And the poor naked carp. So nothing worse than an extinct naked carp. So again, keep your waters clean and sort of think more about these sorts of stuff, right? The more ecological we just, all we need to do is when you're by this sort of lake, don't throw your plastic into there or whatever it is that you got, right? Like, just dispose of it properly and sort of not in our water system, right? A sort of thing like this. Here's another one, Lake Changatan in Shenonji, China. Strange beast with 5 toes and great color, huge eyes and a head, oblique shape from description. Look at how beautiful this sort of lake is, right? So I don't know little about it. They don't sort of they don't even give you like a list of reports and stuff. It's very minimal mention, but just another one out there that probably few have ever heard of that you could do some further research on it and things like that. Here's one in an unknown lake somewhere around Luping, China. This strange creature was filmed, and you can find it on YouTube and watch it. And absolutely fascinating. It's definitely some kind of weird eelish-like to some sort of very large sort of animal. At first, I would have almost thought it was some kind of weird geyser-like stuff shooting up from the surface, but no, you actually see the creature changing around its fin shapes and some kind of head. There's I only showed one frame of it here. You can go check it out and stuff like that, but definitely there's something alive that's creating that, and I've never seen a monster do this exact sort of thing like this exact one. So very extremely interesting, different than typical ones that you'll sort of find, but interesting sort of lake monster there. I wish that a lot of times these newspapers, they'll do that. They're irritating. They'll say lake monster or whatever like this, but then they don't tell you the damn name of the lake. They'll just say what province it's in or whatever place, right? I mean, that's really poor journalism, but they were even doing this in the 1800s. I got all kinds of lakes where I have no idea that it's a guess because they say it's 20 miles from, I don't know, like South Dakota or something in some place, and yet there's like 8 lakes and you all are in this distance, and how do you know which one that it is, right? So I mean, these things can be irritating occasionally, right? So I don't know why like stupid newspapers would not or any sort of news place would not mention at least what the name of the lake is. Like, I mean, for goodness sake, so that's a bit retarded. Right? So, but anyways, I find that really weird, but I noticed that over the years that there's certainly a pile of them, right? So it just makes it hard on you. But here the Mekong River dragon, reported and revered since ancient times. The dragon is said to shoot fireballs out of the Mekong, although skeptics claim gas, this is a phenomenon, is real, and you actually see these fireballs shoot out, and it's always at certain times of year, and very strange. Like, I mean, it's like really weird because they shoot way up in the air, like powerful. And I mean, if it was gas, the other kinds you usually don't see something like that, like as if something was blasting it, right? But some of the films are quite fascinating and sort of stuff like that. There's an interesting one where there's this restaurant along it, and they claim that this the Mekong, the sort of Naga, he went up and actually crawled up on the bank and went into the restaurant and looking, I guess, for people or something to eat. And they actually, because this creature crawled across near their bathroom, near their kitchen, they actually shrined this place. So they left it as a shrine. And you can actually see the scale markings still on the floor that the creature left the imprint on. And I mean, these are so bizarre. It's not, I mean, for some guy to draw this, it would have taken him a zillion years, and every one of them is perfect. It's all sort of, it's very strange. And why would you be so crazy to now make a shrine about? But if it actually is real, and these cases have happened before of creatures climbing up out of the riverbanks and attacking people and stuff. So, I mean, I suppose it's feasible. And they certainly believe in this restaurant that this creature came there. That's right. And sort of thing. So I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. But here's something you can't dispute: is one of the films here. I'm telling you, there's no an animal that I've ever seen that. I mean, the speed that this thing goes is extraordinary. And look at his thin, sort of dragony, like sort of these orm things of the past, like I showed you in some of the other sort of weird lakes in some of the other countries. Again, another one of these long snake-like sort of dragony sort of characters. But this dude, he sticks his head up at a very strange angle, and he propels himself at extraordinary speed. And I mean, absolutely extraordinary. The fastest sort of thing I've ever seen. And the next show there, maybe not the next one, it'll be one of the next few ones. I actually got one where this monster starts chasing these dudes, and he's actually trying to eat them. And I mean, this is the most scariest thing in a lake I have ever seen. I mean, out of all the films I've ever seen, this one scares the shit out of me. So, and I mean, it's at first I thought maybe this guy's got some gimmick where he's got some kind of sideline thing out there and he's trolling and making the monster look like it's chasing him. But no, the more you analyze the stuff, but you can actually see this thing changing its positions. It's not feasible that the guy had some kind of giant dip sea diver planner board to make it go sort of stuff. It's like the way that this thing is doing stuff, it's not feasible. So there's something really weird there, and this thing was actually chasing these guys' boat and seemingly wanting to get it. And I mean, absolutely, like, it's scary, man. So, one of the more creepy lake monsters I've ever ran across there, so we'll cover that in another show. But this Mekong sort of dragon here has been reported since ancient times and sort of stuff like this, and definitely this is just one of the sort of films of it there, but I could have shown you some others or some other ones too that are quite huge that are similar, like where it's seemingly some kind of large snake-like sort of beast of some sort, right? But that's definitely not no ordinary snake, and no ordinary snake in the universe can swim that fast, and any of this sort of stuff. So whatever that thing was is very, very unusual. Like, in the world of lake monsters or any other thing, I've never seen anything quite like it. I've seen similar, like this snake-like thing, but none ever move at a speed like this thing can do. I mean, it's just absolutely magnificent, extremely interesting, sort of thing. In this Surrey River there, but I mean, this Mekong has so many crazy stuff in it, right? It's got quite the body of water. Here, Lake Shikosu, Japan, with depths over 1,000 feet, has good brown trout fishing, but also reports of giant trout or salmon-like fish, some said to be over 10 feet long. One guy actually claimed that he reeled in one over 11 feet long, and they live only in the deepest part of the lake, and they could be some kind of giant trout or salmon. So some of the suspects, it could be like a giant taimen. They are known in certain areas of sort of Asia, besides where I showed you there in Russia and stuff like that. So it's feasible that some of these are relics in some little small bodies of water somehow that got in there ages ago, or who knows, whatever, right? But or in there somehow. But look at how beautiful that is. I mean, my God, I would love to fish that. But I mean, this guy claims he actually caught one over like I can't imagine that 11.5 foot salmon. I mean, well, that would be the scrap of the century, man. I would be so excited and thrilled that I would be insane. So I definitely would love to sort of fish this lake with gigantic sort of epic proportion, musky size sort of baits there, and let's see what happens, baby. This sort of stuff. So, but anyways, this lake sounds like the place to go. Definitely, but I like the idea of that. Whatever it is, and especially if it's some unknown trout species, that's even more cool. I mean, because that's even more astounding, right? Sort of thing. So, one way or the other, whatever type of salmonoid it is, sort of thing, or some kind of char or whatever it might be, it's some kind of species of these sorts of ranges for sure, and certainly would be definitely a worthwhile monster to hunt, right? This sort of thing. So I like that one. Here, Takanami Pond, Japan, giant fish up to 15 feet. It's covered with scales and is like log-like shaped. One account of fisherman was waiting, said the creature bumped into him with its giant tail, and then the guy bolted from shore, and its nickname of the beast, they call it Namatiro. Absolutely beautiful lake. So That sounds pretty cool. Whatever sort of fish like that, he's got these big dragon-like scales on him, sort of idea. That sounds pretty macho. It sounds like that'd be a fun one to be certainly taken on. I definitely could get into that. I love that one. I hear this one, Otoro Pond, Japan. The Takataru is a giant fish monster said to be at least get 10 feet in length and attacks a deer going along the shores. One account mentions a boat being pulled under by the beast with a bunch of witnesses. One was caught in 1917 around a floodgate and was sketched and looks to be some sort of species of giant salmon, possibly. Modern accounts and claims of odd ones caught still persist. One account it eats ducks. Right? So there's another one there that sounds pretty great. So Toro Pond is the place to go. Look at how beautiful that is, right? So I mean, wow. So, I mean, and certainly, I mean, if the thing exists, I mean, you'd be able to keep hunting this sort of thing in a circle. Eventually, you'd have to run across it with a depth finder and sort of trolling and all kinds of stuff like that. Eventually, whatever this thing is, if they're that actual big and from the descriptions, right, sort of thing like that, 10 feet long sort of thing, it could be some kind of giant taimen or something like that. And so it'd be possible, like, I mean, eventually you would probably run across it on the graph at least one of these things or something like that, right? So, yeah, even if they didn't hit, I mean, even if there was a few, you might have to experiment to see what they actually feed off in the lake or whatever, right? But I mean, just another fascinating account. Any lake that has 10-foot sort of plus fish in it of any sort is definitely the place to go. Right? So, I mean, so... extremely exciting sort of a place here, but next year we'll go on some more here. Here's lake monsters of many sorts. Here's some of the over 1,000 species of fish in freshwater fish in Asia that's known. The giant sturgeon of Asia is threatened to near gone in most of its range. Here another relative, the rare Darby sturgeon. This species could attain up to sort of 10 feet in length as well. And these Asian sturgeon at least 15 feet and 1,000 pounds. But due to damming and sort of the Yangtze and any of the other sort of systems around it, these fish have went severely in decline, and so the over 400 species roughly recorded have all sort of went down in decline. Some are extremely getting rare now and stuff like that. So that's an awful shame. But they are transporting these fish into other sort of spots and trying to sort of save them and sort of thing like that. But absolutely beautiful sort of a fish. Boy, I'd love to hook into one of either of these dudes. It'd be absolutely fascinating. Very cool looking, that particular, these sturgeon. Like, I mean, these Asian sturgeon are very, very sort of unique and more ancient-y looking even than ours are, sort of, right? But here's some more here. The giant Mekong catfish, and as I was showing in the Wells ones and stuff like that, they claim these are the biggest on Earth, but like I said, there's too many records stating way bigger ones than these Mekong ones. But overfishing pollution, these giants can at least reach 10 feet and twice that size reported in early times, sort of things like that. But then now they've stocked them in Thailand and different areas of Asia and stuff like that. So they're trying to save them as much as possible, and they're getting pretty huge in some of these sort of smaller lakes that they've stocked them in and sort of things like that. So, but could you imagine, that'd be quite the scrap. No, that's a catfish. Sort of stuff like that. But you certainly wouldn't want to be swimming too much with that goon around underneath you there, especially if he hasn't had any chow for a while there, doo-doo. Right. But absolutely amazing sort of a giant catfish, just absolutely spectacular fish. These guys may be gone. There hasn't been any seen since like early 2000s sort of range, and they're thought to be possibly extinct. But these giant Chinese paddlefish, records in the past showed some over 25 feet. Look at the size of these things. I mean, absolutely extraordinary. Wow, man. I mean, I thought the paddlefish here were big, right? But I mean, these dudes make them even look like minnows, right? That sort of stuff. So, I mean, this is the king of all sort of monster paddlefish, right? I mean, what a giants, man. So I hope to God there's still a few of them left. I would suspect it's quite possible, more compared to other species of fish, because again, they eat differently, right? So the odds of some normal angler hooking one of these is way less, sort of idea, and sort of thing like that. So it could be that some are still like, you know, it's feasible because they can live a fair length of time, and that sort of thing, and they can get titanic. So you would hope that not every single one had been dragged out, sort of stuff like this. Now here's my dreams as a child. Here, the king of all carp-like sort of species. They're a giant barb, right? The Catlo siamensis, man. Like, I mean, these guys are the king, man, the monster of all monsters. In old days, there was reports of some up to 9 feet long. Right? Like, and like 900 pounds, some of them and stuff like that. But in today's, still even some have been taken up to about near 700 pounds and stuff like that. Look at the size of this. Like, I mean, when you're a carp freak, right? I mean, this is the king. This is the boss of all sort of carp-like sort of fish, even much bigger than the mashir or some of the other ones. But one that I would love to catch just about near as much as these Julian prize carp. And I mean, look at them. Oh my God, they're like a zebra, man. I mean, absolutely astonishing, right? Here's a beautiful big black carp here, sort of thing like this. And this Asian angler battled the moose and got him in, right? But I mean, even these sort of Julian prize carps in some accounts apparently can get over 150 pounds, you know, so, but I mean, usually it's way less than that sort of thing. These guys get way bigger, these giant catlow carpio. So that's my dream someday, to go to something like that Bung reservoir over in Thailand, or one of those ones, a secret lake they call it, and that sort of thing like this. I would kill to hook into one of these dudes, man. I mean, this is the ultimate. I would even rather go for them than almost any of these other ones that I've yet to sort of hook into, because to me, I'm a carp freak, and sort of this is the king of all carp like sort of stuff, right? They'll hit the same kinds of things and do, and could you imagine? I mean, look at the size and girth of that thing. I mean, unbelievable, man. I just so to me, I mean, out of all the monsters I would want to chase over there, this would be the number one on my list. And this Julian Price carp second. I'll hunt these black carp, of course, too. But and I certainly want them on the list, or any of the other ones. There's all kinds of like over in England, they have Crucian carp and all kinds of different ones that I haven't been able to catch yet, and things like that. But this one is the king, and I mean, this is the ultimate sort of giant, like all these are sort of like cyprinid you know, minnow, giant minnow like sort of monsters here, right? Sort of idea. And so the thing is that, I mean, this is the King Kong of all King Kongs, right? Like, I mean, wow. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, who would turn down a scrap with something like that? Right? So, absolutely. So that's pretty monstrous. So if you saw that swimming through the pond, you'd think it was the old Loch Ness monster. Sort of stuff like that, right? So, but you know, absolutely, this is the ultimate dream fish for me. So, if I was going to go, I'd like to go to that place, because they also transported all kinds of other fish, from giant gar to red-tailed catfish, and all kinds of ones that are from other places that I would have to travel many sort of locations to get these worldwide. Instead, I could all be in the same sort of action place, right? And sadly, they don't get as big in some of these ponds as like these goons here, because this Mekong now is in really bad sort of shape, and they're almost pretty well extinct out of a lot of their sort of regular range, and a very sort of thing like that. But they have transplanted them enough that at least they ensures that there'll still always be some around for a while anyways, at least as long as they take care of the fisheries and that sort of thing. But what an unbelievable titanic monster. So absolutely fascinating. Here, lake monsters, werpers, here the Mekong giant mottled eel. Now they can get way bigger than this one, but this was the only photo that I could find of one. But apparently they can get fairly pretty big, and at least about 50 pounds sort of on them. Here's an old photo from a giant New Zealand sort of eel, right? So yeah, as you can see, some of them can get pretty huge, man, right? Like sort of the thing like that. So nobody knows it. I mean, there's so many of these accounts, like I said, worldwide of this sort of stuff that it could be that these stories are true, and that there is way bigger eels out there that we know of that are out there, right? And there was a couple other lakes I wanted to cover. There was a fascinating one. It's in Asia. It's on some island, and there's stories there of these 15-foot monsters in this lake, and I couldn't find the damn name of the lake again. So maybe I'll include it again on another sort of show. There's so many of these, but I wanted to give you a sort of a decent sort of example of what possibly is sort of out there. But I mean, absolutely. So just it gives you an idea. There's a lot of sort of strange sort of other ones here. I could have covered more. There's like the kappa, this really strange sort of turtle-like sort of a bizarre creature. There's even an actual this ancient sort of they found this relic where these Chinese they sort of actually kept. These guys had kept this sort of kappa, a part of his feet in the box, and it's never been identified. Like, nobody's been able to identify what creature that it would have belonged to, and they claim it was this kappa. And it's very, even though a lot of people think these, it could be that they gave it more mythological things than what it really is. And it could be some strange turtle that's developed also a shell along at the top of its head, possibly, right? So it's just another sort of interesting cryptid out there that's some kind of, he looks similar to a turtle, but he's got a turtle-like shell on his head, like a sort of Gilligan-like hat, right? It's sort of idea. But I mean, there is this sort of archival sort of thing where they actually got one of these kappas sort of a happened bomb-like thing in this box, and you see his claws there, and I mean, they're very strange. Like, there was this, there was another one here I could have included. It was this tiny pond, and for hundreds of years there was this tale of these giant monsters, sort of turtle, tortoise-like things that were the size of a human being and stuff like that. And even people that lived on there, right on this tiny little pond, you could almost like jump, like I mean, seriously, if you had a pole vault, you could almost leap across the lake. That's how small it is, right? And yet sometimes whole families sitting there for generations, decades and stuff, never seen the creature, and yet they actually exist, and they're a sort of giant sort of tortoise sort of thing that got in there, some kind of huge giant Chinese sort of turtle tortoise sort of thing. And but they're just absolutely titanic. But who would believe, like, I mean, this is a tiny little pond, and they're not known any other place, and sort of just in this little small thing. But they lived in there for hundreds of years, yet almost nobody would ever see them, and it's just a circular little pond. So, I mean, if some giant 8-10 foot sort of goon monster, sort of turtle-like thing, I forget if they were turtles or there's some kind of, but anyways, some kind of either giant freshwater turtle or a tortoise-like species, but they suspect they could be actually another species that comes from this sort of this other area there that is sort of got like locked in this sort of pond somehow. But nobody has ever verified that, so they could be a separate species. I don't know. There was very little bit about the article when I saw it years ago, but it was still fascinating. Sort of just an extra side thing to mention that, I mean, could you imagine in a little pond, and families lived there for generations of this, and many of them never saw this thing once, and there was like at least several of these things in this lake. So, I mean, absolutely fascinating. So just another sort of step to give you some ideas that there's certainly a lot of sort of interesting things out there that we don't sort of know about. But next show there, we'll start doing some maybe other places, like maybe South America next time, or I might end up doing a little bit more of these. It all depends on what sort of what I could find right with me at that moment enough to make another show and sort of stuff, because I have so much of this stuff, and like I said, I never was the best at cataloging it properly, so it's hard to sort of find these sort of things after. But if you definitely, if you have any sort of cryptozoological sort of sightings, and you see anything like that, or any kind of sort of monsters out there, I'm certainly interested in that. And sort of giant fish tails and that sort of thing like that. But it just goes to show you there that, I mean, there's some astonishing, bizarre sort of stuff, and there's certainly Nessie isn't the only guy in town, right? Sort of thing. So there's way, way more sort of animals out there that these things have been told, some of them for centuries, to sort of thing like that, and they sort of, just goes to show you that sort of it's quite feasible that these things, there's a lot more out there than we could ever imagine. And there was some other ones I cover on the other show. I covered another one from Burma and Thailand, and I do a full sort of thing on them on the sort of, what show was that again? It was the one with sort of, it was one with Bigfoot or something. I'll have to check for you again. I got to remember what it was that we put it on, because I think it was the one with the sort of tombstone epitaph photo in it, sort of one. But what it is that this sort of, he looks like a giant sort of ancient prehistoric crocodile with some kind of weird sort of sensors on the front of his nose. Absolutely, it was creepiest sort of goon, like sort of, they call him a dragon, like Fogonaga, right? The sort of monster dragon, and I mean, he definitely looks like some kind of prehistoric dragon. so he's pretty wild out there. So I could have put him in here too, I suppose, sort of thing. But I mean, I already put him on the other show, so if you want to check him out and stuff like that. And like I said, it's irritating sometimes. These guys will say the monsters in the Mekong or this place and that, and then you find out later that no, it actually was filmed that. So I wish people, like, when you're doing these things, try and sort of, like I said, sometimes I put a wrong one because the information that I gotten from many sources all claimed it was this link, but it ended up being another one, right? Eventually, when I was able to fully verify some of them, right? And sort of thing like that. So they don't harm the sort of monster film. There's still a monster film. There's still a monster there. But I mean, it's annoying when they do that because, sort of thing. So, but anyways, stay tuned for some our next shows there, and hopefully you enjoyed there. That there's certainly some pretty creepy dudes out there that you must admit are pretty sort of wild. Now there's something interesting here. I just realized that this is we must have missed this, and thank goodness I got this in this time. Here, the Nagara River in Japan. Here, I wanted to talk about this one. I said, this happened the last time where one of the slides slipped through, so luckily I looked again, and here we go. So here's one that I wanted to talk about when I was talking about in the Lochness Monster about giant sort of rays here. As you can see, this sort of giant monster Mekong ray here. Look at some of them are over 15 feet. Look at the size of that, and that's in fresh water, right? Well, here, this Nagara River, there could be an unknown species of giant stingray that lives in it. In 1986, a giant ray over 6 feet with a huge tail was witnessed gliding through the air. Another account by school children saw an over 6 foot stingray swimming in clear water, seemingly relaxing. It was just like putting around, sort of stuff like that. And so, I mean, this Nagara River here in Japan may have a totally unknown species of a giant ray in it of some sort. I would love to hunt this. I mean, this is super cool. I mean, because the ones you're seeing are Titanic, so you have a better shot of landing the thing. And yeah, because I'd hate breaking them off ever if this sort of, because there couldn't be many of these things. So and thank goodness I almost never have broken off sort of fish. But I mean, you want to be on the safest side ever and to land one of these properly, get it scientifically discovered, let the thing go and without harming it, and sort of away we go, right? So I would love to sort of fish this place because I mean that's an absolutely fascinating one. But here's this Niagara River, so it looks beautiful. I mean that would be fantastic fishing. Like you can see, look at all the empty shoreline there. You'd be able to sort of set up like sort of typical wells like catfish sort of equipment and this kinds of stuff, ones that can handle these big mooses and sort of get some chunk fish bait out there and due to the old stingray is going to come along. So the only thing is because you don't know the species. I mean some of them have sort of pretty deadly sort of whipped stingers on them and this sort of thing like that. So at first you'd want to sort of if I wasn't able to get there, if somebody was able to get out there and try this, be very careful of sort of that part of it, right? Like sort of make sure you have somebody sort of maybe even possibly that's more familiar with handling these giant rays, that you could get somebody to come and fish with you out in that sort of areas to help you along with it, sort of like to handle it properly, right? Because all you want to do is sort of get a catalog, sort of stuff like that, and or it'd be nice even to catch a smaller one that you could sort of capture and keep it alive, sort of, and thing like that, and let them study it and then release it after, right, or what have you. But whatever the case, definitely that's sort of the place to go. So, so absolutely astonishing sort of a thing. But like I said, some of these accounts I've seen in other sort of countries too are very ray-like, and it could be that there's some other ones out there that we don't know of, including even in Lochness is quite feasible, sort of thing like that. So just another thing to think about. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed this show, and luckily we fixed this, and this frame didn't slide by us this time like in some of the other sort of episodes. Sort of stuff like that. And I hate this. It's very difficult because it's this very small thing to work off of the screen, and sort of and it can be annoying that sort of way. So stay tuned for next week show there, and bye for now.